Almost 10 days ago, we dipped apples in honey and reimagined a more positive future. That's the gist of Rosh Hashanah, looking forward. Yom Kippur, on the other hand, turns us to the past. We look back on how we have fallen short as individuals and collectively as Jews. Even the name of tonight's service does that. Did you know that Kol Nidre, which means all vows, are the first words of a special legal ritual believed to have developed in early medieval times related to persecution against Jews? At various times in history, Jewish people were forced to convert, usually to Christianity, upon pain of death. After the danger had passed, however, many of these forced converts wanted to return to the synagogue and be Jews again. But this was complicated by the fact that they had been forced to swear vows to another religion. Because of the seriousness with which our ancestors viewed verbal promises, the Kol Nidre legal formula was developed precisely to enable those who left Judaism to return and pray with the Jewish community, thus absolving them of the vows they had made under duress to the church. That, my friends, is the origin of Kol Nidre, a response to what we now call anti-Semitism. 2 months ago, Israel's current foreign minister, Yair Lapid, spoke before the Global Forum for Combating Anti-Semitism in Jerusalem. He began his address recounting how 2016 through 2020 set a record for the number of hate crimes directed at Jews worldwide. And it's clear that 2021 will exceed last year in places like Poland, where legislation was approved that borders on Holocaust denial. In Muslim countries, blood libels against Jews are routinely purveyed. In Eastern and Central Europe, Jews have been attacked on the streets and cemeteries are being desecrated. Then there's the growing gulf between the state of Israel and the Jewish people worldwide. After 54 years of occupying the West Bank of Jordan with no resolution in sight, Israel is losing sympathy and no longer viewed as a victim. The number of American Jews who now think of Israel as an apartheid state is up to 25%. And 22% of American Jews believe Israel is committing, quote, a slow genocide against the Palestinians. This isn't just the fringe far left. There are over 7 million American Jews. So do the math on 25% of that. And you get the number of American Jews who have felt alienated by Israeli policy in recent years. Previous Israeli administrations fed on the fear and trauma in every Jewish person's DNA when it comes to anti-Semitism. But they never shaped a coherent policy to address it. The numbers only grew worse. So Israel's new foreign minister, Yair Lapid, has made his primary job finding ways not simply to discuss anti-Semitic incidents or use the issue of anti-Semitism for political advantage, but to actually deal with the crisis of modern global anti-Semitism. It's a personal issue since Lapid's grandfather died in a Nazi gas chamber. Lapid calls the Holocaust, quote, the most horrible event in the history of the nations and the supreme and most monstrous manifestation of racism in human history. But by suggesting that anti-Semitism is the prime example of a larger phenomenon infecting society, racism and xenophobia, hatred of the other, he upset those who don't want hatred of the Jew to be associated with other hatreds. For Lapid, hatred of the other is universal. It's just the target who is different. He reminds us that the Poles, Lithuanians, Hungarians, Croatians who participated in the Nazi death machine never read a word of Nazi ideology. They just acted out of a base hatred of the foreigner, in this case, the Jews. As Bibi Netanyahu's own father, historian Ben-Zion Netanyahu writes, and I quote, "The instinct of hatred was simply hardened into a doctrine." For Lapid, if memory of the Holocaust can become a major engine in the war against hatred of the other, it won't lead to an erosion of awareness about the Holocaust. Quite the contrary, it will highlight it and grant it moral power. Anti-Semitism, a unique phenomenon in human history, can only exist in a world in which racism has not been eradicated. You can't fight hatred of Jews honestly while being racist toward others, whether the other is an Arab Israeli or a black American. As Elie Wiesel put it, and I quote, "Someone who hates one group will end up hating everyone, and ultimately hating himself or herself." So for Minister Lapid, the fight against racism and xenophobia needs to be part of our set of considerations in choosing our friends in the world, from the way in which we deal with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to how we relate to minorities living alongside us. He also urged us Jews in America to lower the level of hysteria in the face of criticism. Maybe every anti-Semite opposes our policy in the Gaza Strip, he said, but not everyone who opposes our policy in Gaza is an anti-Semite, end quote. The Jewish people's existential dread about anti-Semitism runs deep. But our judgment is warped if we believe that anti-Semitism is the worst Jewish problem facing most Jewish kids on American college campuses. It's convenient for groups to inflate the scope of anti-Semitism in America for political advantage. That is why Ben & Jerry's ice cream has been branded a company infected with anti-Semitism for its criticism of Israel. Now, I find Ben & Jerry's ice cream boycott misguided and wrong, but regarding the shunning of Chunky Monkey on the West Bank, who cares? Far more serious, if you're really serious, is a double standard that holds that we Jews, who are the victims of anti-Semitism and permitted everything, while critics of Israeli policy are by definition anti-Semites. That view, which has been inflamed in recent years, has harmed our ability to truly fight anti-Semitism, and the numbers prove it. For American Jews in 2021, anti-Semitism is not the most imminent threat or worst problem. So then just what is the biggest threat facing American Jewry? Whether you are middle-aged or older, whether you are a white Jew or a Jew of color, whether you are in college or a Jewish 20 or 30 or 40 or 70-something, some believe the most immediate challenge facing us is the threat of extinction. They insist, in the face of intermarriage and assimilation, that raw survival is the Jewish people's most serious challenge today. History, however, simply will not support that prophecy of doom and gloom. If we were never convinced before, surely we should be convinced now in the aftermath of the Holocaust. Because if the systematic, concentrated power of the most brutal human monsters on earth could exterminate 1 out of every 3 Jews in the world and still not end Jewish existence, little else will. Every generation has included a number who predicted our imminent extinction. Don't listen to them. Survival cannot be our greatest challenge because survival is not the purpose of Jewish existence. The purpose of Jewish life is not that Jews survive. The purpose of Jewish life is that Jews live Jewish lives. What matters is a living awareness of what it means to be an or lagoyim, a light unto the nation, and to be nishbarei lev, God's helpers and healers of broken hearts in a broken world. The greatest threat to Jewish life is not that Jews will die out, but that the teachings of Judaism will become irrelevant. Fewer Jews does not mean that the group will disappear, but that Judaism itself will have less of an impact on our lives and on the world. Jews there will always be. What really is at stake is what kind of Jews will there be? Narrow-minded or open-hearted? Jews who accept all Jews as Jews, or only what the Jewish religious right refers to as Torah true Jews, which none of you are by their definition if you're listening to a female cantor or choosing to watch live stream on a Jewish holiday. 50 years ago, among the greatest Jewish philosophers of the 20th century, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel compared American Jewry to a messenger who forgot his message. Again, the issue is not whether the Jewish messenger will die. A messenger who forgets his message may very well survive. But what difference does it make if he forgets the message? Even if he lives, he is a dead messenger. Until my parents' generation, the most important one word in Jewish life was how. In the face of anti-Semitism, severe economic adversity, societal exclusion, Jews always asked, how? How can we best fight anti-Semites? How can we win support for Israel? How can I get into a college that has a history of excluding Jews? Always the question, how? I would argue that the new overriding question, if you are really tuned in to data in the present and really care about the Jewish future, the overriding question is not how, but why? Why is Judaism so essential? Why is Israel important? Why is a synagogue like this one the key to a lifelong Jewish identity? Why should I even bother to attend high holiday services? An unthinkable question in most of our lifetimes. When I was a younger rabbi, I worried much more about the how. Upon arriving here over 30 years ago, I started the Hebrew Marathon, teaching hundreds of Jewish adults how to read Hebrew. I conducted adult ed programs on how to lead your own Seder, how to study Torah. When I led the Temple High School program into the 2000s, we even had Jewish literacy exams for confirmants and 11th, 12th grade graduates. I still find all that important, but I worry much more now about whether the 88% of American Jews and the vast majority of Memphis Jews who are not and never will be Orthodox will catch why it matters. I know that Nietzsche didn't mean it regarding Judaism, but he once stated, "He who has a why to live can bear with any how." And most Jews nowadays, especially those under 50, need the why transmitted better. The old answers to why be Jewish are no longer convincing. Because Jews died for you isn't a positive identity. Neither is because others want to kill us. Nor is you should give tzedakah to Jewish causes that deny your own expression of Judaism and religious equality for women. Again, what kind of Judaism are we talking about? I'm convinced that if we can transmit why it is important to carry forward the greatest blueprint for living, loving, and doing the world has ever known, Judaism, I'm convinced that if we can get people to experience, support, tune in to Jewish religious expressions like temple and discover why this faith that inspires joy on the inside and being a mensch on the outside matters, only then does the future look bright. A more immediate problem than whether Ben and Jerry's Chunky Monkey is available on the West Bank or why Jewish college students aren't as enraged about BDS as their grandparents are, is whether the majority of Jews under 50 across America even care enough to attend services on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, on Judaism's holiest days, even virtually, rather than miss work, school, or a sporting event. I'm not judging, just observing how much easier it is to talk about anti-Semites in the world or talk about politics left or right, rather than address something as immediate as our own Jewish commitments. How ironic that Kol Nidre was composed for medieval Jews forced to make vows and convert to Christianity, while we 2021 American Jews are so completely at home in a largely Christian society, prospering professionally and loving our freedom. The medieval Jews who sang Kol Nidre wanted a way back into Judaism. In 2021, it is conceivable that American Jews a generation or two from now could opt out to enjoy the good life or go completely virtual with their Judaism, even when COVID is over. The question of why be Jewish or why show up in person even when it's safe after COVID is a question Jews have never faced in our entire history. Anti-Semitism forced us to create a community of humanity amidst the inhumanity of the Inquisition, Cossacks, and Nazis. Nowadays, we American Jews enjoy our independence, success, and freedom so much, including the freedom to opt out of exploring Judaism. What is the why to do Jewish for the 90% of American Jews who aren't Orthodox, beyond nostalgia or that it was important to our parents and grandparents who lived in a totally different world? Most Jews care about being Jewish for some unexplainable reason. Most Jews in some way still want to be Jews, but they don't quite know what to do about it. So the pressing challenge we face is to help Jews recover and rediscover the uniqueness of Judaism, the relevance, importance, and resonance of our timeless faith in this time and place. No longer can we count on neighborhood memories, Yiddishkeit, shared experiences to bond us to our Jewishness. Some still operate on that emotional appeal to yesteryear. But that doesn't seem to work beyond perhaps in fundraising. We no longer live in the old neighborhoods of the 1970s. Since my own arrival here in the 90s, there are fewer Jewish children in Memphis, and they are attending more and more different schools, which means that we must rebuild community under a much bigger tent of Jewish inclusion. We must reimagine instead of pretending that today is yesterday. Why must the Jewish people survive? Because there can be no Judaism without Jews to spread Yom Kippur's message, that love and justice are incomplete without each other. Judaism introduced the idea of a loving God, but we contend that if God is only love, then there is no moral basis for waging war on evil, because war is not loving. So Judaism introduced the idea we repeat over and over again on Yom Kippur, that God wants us to be both loving and good. That's what these 24 hours are all about. If we're truly willing to make a change, then God moves on Yom Kippur from the throne of justice to the throne of compassion and forgiveness. God forgives every human soul out of God's boundless love and mercy. That's Judaism's faith message to the world, but you need Jewish messengers to proclaim that message. What about Judaism's other timeless messages you already know, like increasing sanctity in the world by transforming the ordinary into the sacred, like turning Friday evening into Shabbat, or turning age 13 into becoming a child of mitzvah, or turning a sacred relationship into something we call marriage, or any of the mitzvah deeds requiring a real live person to do them. Only Judaism insists that deeds, not just faith, deeds are the litmus test of a genuine faith. My friends, it's time to reimagine the why question for the larger body, mind, and soul of the Jewish people, and for our individual bodies, minds, and souls, since it is entirely possible to die as Jews while we are still living as comfortable Americans. assuring that there will be Jews for Judaism when COVID is over, especially for the under 50, depends on our ability to transmit and demonstrate the why. Here at Temple, we are ready to help every Jewish person discover and renew the blessing of Judaism and a life of Jewish blessing. But that decision is up to each one of us. And it is never too late for any of us, even now, especially now. Amen.